The U.S. Department of Transportation is opening an investigation into Delta Airlines as the airline still has failed to recover following last week's global tech breakdown.
Regulators are looking into Delta's treatment of passengers who are stranded from canceled or delayed flights and whether that violated federal rules. U.S. Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg says Delta's response has impacted more than 500,000 people.
Part of why we are opening this investigation is the scale of the problem. Over 6,000 flights have been canceled since Friday. Hundreds of flights have been canceled today, and we estimate that more than 500,000 passengers have been impacted by this. So we're not taking this step lightly, but clearly there is something unique to Delta.
Those with Delta say the airline may not return to normal operations until the end of the week. In the meantime, passengers at MSP in the Twin Cities continue to deal with those cancellations and delays.
Barrett Leone spoke to a travel expert about what your rights are if something similar happens to you.
Another day of cancellations, campouts,
and the flight was canceled with no reason at all.
And chaos at MSP Airport.
I'm a little frustrated that we weren't notified sooner that it was canceled, but I mean, what can you do?
After a nightmare travel weekend, still hundreds of flight delays and cancellations at the airport, mostly Delta.
It's been an experience. We don't fly very often. So hopefully the next flight goes better.
One family forced to find a hotel after turning in their apartment keys Tuesday morning.
Family, we're moving to Boston today, and we're expecting to be arriving there to get a new apartment, but yeah, it's quite challenging.
He's not alone.
This is ugly. This is about as bad as it gets for an airline.
Delta says it will reimburse additional expenses as a result of the disruption, but experts say it won't be quick.
This is not just a CrowdStrike problem anymore. This is a Delta problem.
Now, experts with Thrifty Travelers say to keep every single receipt, even the bigger ones, to check in with travel insurance to fill gaps where Delta can't, and to expect things to take some time.
When an airline cancels or significantly delays a flight, you are entitled to a refund. Not just a travel credit or a voucher, but getting your money back.
Potter says Delta travelers should prepare for the worst throughout the weekend, maybe longer.
This is one of, if not the biggest airline meltdowns ever.
At MSP Airport, Barrett Leone, WCCO News.
Delta has canceled more than 5,000 flights in the last few days. That's more than all the canceled flights of 2018 and 2019 combined.
Coming up next in sports, he's a familiar name for his efforts as a player, but coming up next, meet Dylan Thomas in his new role as self-appointed first base coach. Got that story coming up next.